Hey, I'm Doug Draper, 1992 graduate from the University of Kansas, and I'd like to welcome you to On the Banks. On the Banks is the only fraternity podcast where we get brothers from across our chapters, get to know them a little bit more, and share the values of our fraternity. And today I'm incredibly excited because not only are we interviewing and having a guest on the pod, but he's a pledge brother of mine from Kansas, and really excited to have him on. So, if you didn't know, he's created a path that makes other careers like mine look extremely safe, right? Lieutenant colonel in the military to a comedy background, all the way to Hollywood. As I mentioned, the cool thing is we share the values of Phi Gamma Delta: friendship, knowledge, service, morality, and excellence. And he has clearly lived them out very boldly. And we're now here to talk about a book that he just came out with. It's called Grit, Spit, and of course, Never Quit. Rob Riggle, welcome to On the Banks, my friend. How you doing?
Good, Drew. Thanks for having me. It's good to see you again. This is fun.
Yeah. It's great. I really appreciate that. So, anyway, I just wanted to kind of queue up and talk a little bit about your book. I think some brothers have heard about it and read it, right? And the one thread that kind of comes through there all the time is like you've literally lived and experienced two different worlds that most often don't intersect, right? The Marine Corps and obviously comedy. It feels like maybe that contrast has kind of shaped your approach in life as I read the book. But really, the gist is like, what was the spark behind it? Like when I heard that you were writing a book, I'm like, what? Hold on a second. Let me dive into this one. So, just for our audience, talk about the catalyst behind all that.
Well, well, thanks for buying it and reading it. I appreciate that. But no, every year I sit down over Christmas break time frame, usually right at the beginning of the year, and I write down my goals for the coming year. I've been doing it pretty much ever since I graduated from KU with you. And it's I found it to be highly effective because I don't only just write down the goal, I write down the goal that I want to try to achieve, and then also I write down why I want to achieve it. And somewhere along the road, probably 10 years ago, I would sit around telling stories with people in green rooms or on set or just in general, people would be sharing stories and I'd share a story from Afghanistan or from Kosovo or from Liberia or from, boot camp or from the fraternity or from being on the set of Saturday Night Live or being on the set, of Step Brothers or, whatever it was. And somebody said, you ought to write a book. And that's how it starts, and you go, maybe, I never even thought about it. I was like, I don't know, maybe I got a lot of stories. So I put it on my goals list.
Mhm.
And I'm pretty good about ticking off those goals if I write them down. I really make a commitment to them. And that was the one goal that kept getting pushed to the next year and pushed to the next year and pushed to the next year. And it was getting to a point where I was getting embarrassed for myself. I was getting mad at myself. I was like, are you going to do this thing or not? You just keep writing on your goal list and keep pushing it, kicking it down the road to the next year and the next year and the next year. And then I remember I read somewhere about self-esteem. Everybody these days likes to point outward and say, "You affect my self-esteem. You did this to me, and you this. That's why I can't get ahead." And and you. But yeah, I think your self-esteem comes from, you make a promise to yourself, whatever that promise is, and you either keep it or you don't. And if you keep the promise that you make to yourself, your self-esteem goes up. And
Mhm.
if you don't keep that promise you make to yourself, your self-esteem goes down because you get down on yourself. So I was tired of kicking this thing down the road. So about 3 years ago, maybe 2.5 years ago, I finally sat down and said, "You're doing it. You're just going to do it. You're just going to start. I don't care if it's a hot mess." And I wrote out a book proposal. I sent it to my agent. They sent it to their literary agent. He looked at it, said, "Yeah, let's try to go sell this thing." So we found a publisher, And then I had a deadline, and I kept extending that deadline. See, because it was hard, because if I just went to a cabin in the woods and had my laptop and a notebook and maybe a couple books for inspiration or a couple of my journals that I kept from deployments or whatever, maybe I could have wrote the thing in 6 months to a year. But it took me about 2 years, maybe 2 years and some change to write the thing, because that's not the only thing I'm doing. I gotta, there's I don't get paid on the 1st and the 15th. I eat what I kill. So I'm out there every day trying to find work, developing TV shows, developing movie scripts, auditioning for work in front of the camera, producing behind the camera. Just any way you can find ways to make money. That's what I have to do. I have to hustle, and it never stops. And every year at the beginning of the year, I don't know where the money's coming from. I just know that I got to get out there and start hustling. So, with that in mind, the only time I had to write was in my free time. Well, when I finally do get some downtime, I want to go play golf. I want to watch the Jayhawks. I want to hang out with my friends. It's hard. So it took a lot more time and energy than I thought it was going to take. Had I known how much of a tester or a challenge it would have been, I don't know if I would have started. So I think maybe a little ignorance is bliss on that as well. But I'm glad I wrote it. There's a lot of stories I left on the cutting room floor, so to speak, just because I was trying to make a motivational memoir, if you will. My favorite books. I don't read fiction. I don't like to read fiction. I like to see my fiction on the screen. I like watching it in TV or film. I but I do love nonfiction. I like reading history books. I like reading biographies. I like reading self-help books. Anything to improve my knowledge, really tangible, usable stuff. So I always liked reading biographies and memoirs, because I could look at people in history that have had incredible challenges or taken on incredible responsibilities or have had to overcome something tremendous, and I got to witness, or vicariously through their book, experience what they experienced and listen to how they solved problems and listen to their thought process, and I always loved that. So I figured, well, if there was anything in my journey that could help someone on their journey, maybe it would be a useful book. So that's kind of what I tried to write it as a motivational memoir, which then meant a lot of the stories I had, because I've got great stories from our days in college. We had a blast. None of those are usable. Well, I shouldn't say none of them. A lot of them weren't usable in this book. So I had to really pick and choose the stories and try to weave together something. And I was very blessed to have great editors who, when I would send them stuff, they would read it, give great notes, great comments, ask me questions that made me think deeper, made me reflect deeper. It was great. It was very cathartic. So all in all, it was a great experience, and I'm glad I did it. I don't know if I'd do it again though.
Yeah. Oh, well, one and done. It's a good read. Yeah. You,
Maybe.
you,
I don't know. You never know what life is gonna have for you.
yeah.
So maybe.
Yeah, it was good. Yeah, it was. The cool thing about the book is there was a lot of your life story that I was not personally familiar with. A lot of that's the military, right? And one of the chapters that you started with, and when you were queuing up your decision to go in your in service, um, I think the last sentence in the book was like, I think I've made a big mistake, right?
It was
And
in that first chapter, I think,
yeah,
when I got to officer candidate school, there's always that moment. And if everybody's got to be honest. If you've ever been through any kind of military boot camp or officer candidate school, there's that moment where you're like, what have I done?
yeah,
When everybody's yelling at you and there's not a friendly face in sight, and you realize you've got 12 more weeks of this. It's a bad feeling.
yeah, yeah. So obviously grit, that's where that comes in. But was there in that 12 weeks or in your process was there a time or a light that's like, okay, I can do this. I think I made a big mistake. I'm sure there was apprehension for a while, but over time, you're like, I think I can do this. Was there something or a time frame in that 12 weeks where it just kind of clicked with you? And you're like, no, I did make the right decision. And I think this could be a long-term career for me.
Well, the thing about officer candidate school, you're never really comfortable until graduation day, um, which I think is built in. That's how they want it to be. They got to keep you
Hmm.
on edge and perhaps a little stressed out. But yeah, there were times when I would get done with a run or some sort of test, whatever the test was, close order drill, the combat conditioning course, a written exam, field stripping your weapon, whatever the challenge or test was, navigation through the woods at night, or whatever it is, you would get done and you would accomplish the task, and you would say, okay, I did it. I did that. That's done. I did it and I did it well. I passed. Because they had a high standard of passing too. It wasn't just like, 6 out of 10. You had to be basically 8 or 9 out of 10 if you were going to try to pass anything there. Anything less, you got a failure. And if you got 3 failures, you were gone on anything. So, so yeah, yeah, there were many moments. I would finish something and I'd be like, yes, I did it. Yes,
Right.
I did it. But all those were just exams. You still had to get through it all. And then graduation day, that's the first time where I was like, okay, okay. The rest I'll learn. If I can learn all that from as green as I was, I'll learn the rest. I'll be fine. I may make some mistakes along the way, but I got this. I got this.
Yeah.
Which is a
Yeah.
great feeling too, because I think that's what the Marine Corps does very, very well, better than any other service. Um, Whatever your perceived limits are, like I had a picture in my mind of what I could do physically. I had a picture in my mind of what I could endure physically and mentally and emotionally. Like that's it. That's maxed out. And the Marine Corps comes along and they go, "Oh, please. You're not even close to what you can do. Here's where the Marine Corps minimum standard is, and you're going to go way above that." And all of a sudden you're like, well, that's impossible. That's stupid to even think about. I can't do that. I can't stay up for 24 hours and do a 10-mile march with a pack and blah, 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 blah. That's not in the realm. And then
Yeah.
you do it. And then you go, oh my God, I can do it. I can do these things that I never thought I could. And that's maybe on a physical side, right? But then it made me start believing, maybe for the first time ever, that if I could do that, then what else could I do? Maybe I could be an actor or a comedian. Even though it was such a pipe dream. It was such a pipe dream. I just,
Mhm.
late 80s, early 90s, nowadays everybody's got the internet, everybody's got the world at their fingertips. They've got access to information. They've got, if you want to know about talent agency, you can type this. If you want to know how to get be a page or get an internship at NBC in New York, but everything's there. It wasn't there for us. We didn't
Mhm.
have it. We didn't have cell phones. We didn't have tablets. We barely had computers. Those were only used for word processing. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have any of that. And
Mhm.
so it just didn't seem like a realistic dream to become an actor or a comedian. I didn't know anybody in the business. Where was I going to move to New York and what was I going to do? None of it made any sense. But as I moved along in the Marine Corps, I started to believe that I could do whatever I set my mind to. And
Yeah.
it still holds true today, which is that's one of the great things about the Marine Corps. They make you believe you can do things that you don't really believe you can do yourself until you actually do it.
Yeah. Yeah. Very good. Good stuff. So, how did you get to New York? Right. One time when I was like, Riggles in New York. How did that happen? Right. And I know that that was catalyst for a lot of different things. But the military got you there, and then you were kind of doing two different lives, right? You were kind of like day job, night job. It's not linear. It wasn't like you did this, stop, here's my next adventure. You kind of were doing day shift and night shift at the same time. So, how did you get to New York? And then what was it like living in two different worlds while you're trying to, transition or figure out, is this really what I want to do for my next engagement?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I originally had a flight contract in the Marine Corps, and I had my pilot's license when we were in college back in undergrad, and I thought I was going to be a pilot. But I realized that once you pin those wings on, my contract was for a very long time, so I would have ended up being in the Marines, active duty for 20 plus years, 20 years at least before I really would have gotten out because it takes about 2.5 to 3 years to get your wings. When you factor in officer candidate school, the basic school, aviation indoctrination, primary flight training, intermediate flight training, advanced flight training, and then your actual reassignment group, your specific plane, whatever aircraft you get, you have to train on that. So it takes about 2.5 to 3 years to get to the fleet to pin on your wings, and that's when your time starts.
Hmm.
So, 8 years on top of the three, I would have been in for 11. I would have been only had 9 years to retirement. I probably would have stayed in, I wouldn't have got out at that point. Um, and all of a sudden I was just looking down the barrel of 20 years and I was like, well, how'd that happen? And
Yeah.
because I did have dreams and hopes that I didn't share with a lot of people because I didn't think they were real. And whenever I did share them with people, they kind of met with resistance or skepticism. There's always some guy or gal or person in your life who's going to take a big dump on your dreams. You got to guard against that. And they might not even know they're doing it. They might not even realize what they sound like but they bring a negativism, a negative attitude towards your dreams. And you can't have those people around because they're not helpful. Um, so anyway, I made my choice to stop flying and become a ground officer because that shortened my contract to 4 years instead of 8. And when I got done with those 4 years, I'd been promoted to captain by then. I'd already deployed over to Liberia, helped evacuate the embassy there, and I'd done some deployments. I felt good, but I also knew in my mind now is the time that if I'm going to go after this dream, I got to go now. So I was
Hmm.
actually planning on moving to Chicago. And I think I actually moved. I think our fraternity brothers, Kevin Custer and Chris Chase, were Chicago guys. And I remember asking them, "Where should I live?" And I think Chase turned me on to a place where I could store some of my stuff that I had in North Carolina because I had all these plans to go there because I wanted to study at Second City and try to start my path there because I'd heard good things about Second City in Chicago and comedy. Then the Marines found out I was leaving, and the chief of staff for Second Marine Air Wing called me into his office and was like, "What's this crap? You're leaving the Marines, Riggle? We're not good enough for you." And I was like, "No, no, sir, that's not it. I just have," and I wasn't going to tell him. I want to be a comedian. I want to be an actor. Because again, these are
Yeah.
the folks just take a dump on your dreams. So I just said, "I've got some other opportunities, sir. I'm going to pursue, and but thank you very much." And he said, "Well, what if we can get you, where would you want to go if we could get you anywhere?" I said, "Well, if you can get me to Los Angeles or New York, I'll extend. I'll give you 3 more years. I won't augment. I won't become a regular, but I'll give you 3 more." Thinking I had called his bluff, I went back to my office, fully anticipating moving to Chicago when my contract was up. And then the next morning, he had orders for me to New York City. So my plan was to move to Chicago and be a waiter or bartender and study comedy. So I thought, well, shoot, I might as well go to New York and keep my day job, be a Marine, get captain's pay and keep my benefits and then pursue comedy at night up there. So that's what I did. And I got myself to New York and did Marine Corps from 8 to 5 every day, right there in Midtown Manhattan. And then I'd go out and start working on comedy every night down at the Upright Citizens Brigade Theater. Uh, and shows, I would do shows with whoever wanted to write sketches, and I would do lights and sound for other people's shows just to be around the theater. And I ended up
Hmm.
studying, my teachers were Amy Poehler and Matt Walsh and some of the best players in New York I ended up learning from. So very grateful for that opportunity. And then I grinded for 7 years before I finally got a break. Um, and that's the way it goes. But
Yeah.
yeah, no regrets at all. But that's the path that got me to New York.
Yeah, that's great. So what in what you just said, the thing that popped in my mind is you said I don't know when the military pays, but you said the first and the 15th of the month, benefits, the whole nine yards. That's like plan A, right? Most people would be like, I made it, right? A lot of our friends are in that position. I'm personally in that position, right? And you
Mhm.
decide to blow it up, right? You're like, plan A, I'm going to blow this up. You could have taken the easy course, which is fine. I mean, I'm technically in plan A, but you didn't, right? I mean, that is a tough decision, to blow it up. So what was the mindset? Was it just simply that enough's enough? I'm tired of talking about it. I need to do it. Like that's a big deal. You blew up plan A to go to plan B. What was the
I think
catalyst to make that happen?
I think just I had I mean, not to be overly dramatic, but I had a quarter life crisis when I made that decision. I was 24 years old when I decided to quit flight school. And it's one of those things everybody comes to crossroads in their lives for all kinds of different reasons. And I had my little coming to Jesus moment when I went down to the beach in Corpus Christi, Texas. I was at Naval Air Station in Corpus Christi, and I was in flight school, and I was doing okay. I wasn't that, passionate about it, which I thought was a problem, especially if you're going to be flying off a ship at night with a bunch of Marines in the back of your aircraft. You want to be passionate about it. I knew this because when we'd go to the bars at night with guys in my squadron, I'd be trying to talk to the girls at the bar, and my buddies were over in the corner talking with their hands, going, "Oh yeah," and they were so passionate about their flying, and I'd be like, "God, we've been doing that all week. Let's talk to the girls," and they'd be over there, "Oh, whatever, whatever," and I was like, "These guys are going to be great pilots. These guys are going to be awesome." And so I noticed that my passion probably wasn't there, um, but uh, I think for me, it was regret. I think. I think I came to a decision that I could live with failure more than I could live with not knowing. And so that was the simple question I asked myself. I was like, well, can you do it and fail? And I said, yeah, I'm just going to suck and I'm not going to be happy about it. And I'll probably be embarrassed and I'll make all kinds of excuses and, I'll do the things that 20 somethings do. But I would rather that than wake up at 50 and think, I could have done that. I could have been a comedian. I could have been on SNL. I could have done that. If I
Mhm.
had just tried, I would have done. Yeah, you'll never know, will you? So those are the things that made me decide. And also I was heavy into reading self-help books. So I was way deep into a bunch of Tony Robbins books at the time. And he asked great questions, like somebody's going to do it. Why not you? Why? Why not you? Give me reasons why not you. Those are pretty weak reasons. How about why it could be you? Oh, okay. Well, those are another good questions. And so that was it. I think I got to the point where I was like, I'm going to go for it because I'm young. I was 24 at the time, and I was like, if I'm wrong, I haven't cost myself any. I mean, what have I done? I haven't set myself back. I've got a good career in the Marine Corps. I've got some amazing experiences. I've done some amazing things. I've got great training. I've got my college degree. I've earned the right to live my life a little bit for myself. I can make my own decisions. And it was my own decision. No one was helping me on this one. I didn't talk to anybody about it. So I'll make the decision and I'll live with the consequences. And and that wasn't easy because I would come home. We all go home, for Christmas, and we run into fraternity brothers or we run into friends from high school, and hey, Riggle, you still in the Marines? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I heard you doing some comedy. Are you doing stand up or some shit? And you'd be like, yeah, thanks. Have I seen you in anything? What would I have seen you in? Have you done anything?
Yeah.
And you have to put up with that. You have to, smile and nod and just dismiss everybody because that's them projecting their fears onto me. I'm sorry you didn't go for it. I am, and I might fail. And then, then you can throw your rocks at that point if you want.
Mhm.
But in the meantime, I'm just going to keep my head down and keep doing my work, try to improve, try to get better, and make the most of every opportunity I get. And then I got blessed, and I learned from great people, and I got opportunities. And when I got the opportunities, I made the most of them. And then those opportunities led to other opportunities. And I just kept trying to make the most of every opportunity I got and try to be good to people so that, you know, if they got another project, they would remember me and say, I liked working with Riggle. I'll bring him back. And, you know, and
Yeah.
uh, real simple lessons like that. But I think ultimately for me, it was the fear of regret more than the fear of failure.
Hmm. That's good. Yeah, loss is very tangible. Here's what I'm giving up for the opportunity of the unknown, right? And that's hard to overcome regardless of your career path, to say, here's where I am. This is plan E. I can walk away from this. This is tangible. I'm going to lose this, that, and the other. But what about the unknown? That's intangible. It's hard to wrap your head around. So that's really cool. That I would say it's a guy named Kevin, a guy named Tony, and a beach at Corpus Christi kind of had you pivot, right?
Well, and the thing is too, a lot of people, I do believe that, because when I was in New York, I used to hear people, and out here in LA, I get a lot of veterans who write me and they're like, hey, or not even veterans, other people, just people in general, young people, college kids, a lot of time. Hey, I think I really want to be an actor, but they're scared, because a life in the arts is hard. It just is. There's no way around it. And if you're not comfortable in that, you're going to have a hard time. But they'll write, say, I think I'm going to give it, I'm going to come out, I'm going to do it for about a year. And if I don't make it, then I'm going to go, back to whatever I do. Or I'm going to get a corporate job, or I'm going to teach, or I'm whatever. Fine, fine. And you don't have to justify your life to anybody. So long as you're happy and productive and a good person, you don't have to justify your life to anybody. But I do believe that you can't give a life in the arts a year and think that it's going to happen. It doesn't work like that. It's like any other profession. You have to work at it. You have to study. You have to practice. You have to learn. You have to get up and fail. You have to succeed. You have to run the gauntlet. There's no shortcuts to it. I
Mm.
always use the analogy. I had people come to me and they're like, everybody wants the shortcut. Everybody wants it. I get it. That's human nature. Human nature is to seek the path of least resistance. I get it. I really do. But some things you can't take a shortcut. You don't want a doctor who took a shortcut. You don't want a dentist who took a shortcut. I could, you can dress up in a karate gi and I can tie a black belt around your waist and you can walk around and tell everybody you're a black belt. But if you get on the mat with someone, you're going to get exposed real fast if you haven't done the work, if you haven't gone through the progressions. So, all those people that want the shortcuts, I'm always like, I hear you and I empathize, but there is none. You got to go do the work. Go get your white belt, your yellow, your orange, your green, work your way up, get good at what you do. And then when you have that black belt, you're the real deal. And when you get your opportunity, you'll be a black belt for real and you'll know how to handle the situations. You'll know how to handle the opportunities. You'll make the most of it and you'll quite literally and figuratively kick ass. And that's the way to do it. Nobody wants to hear that though, because nobody wants to invest 10 years into a maybe, into a
Yeah.
question mark, into a maybe it'll happen, maybe it won't. But while you're doing that 10-year progression of getting good at your art, um, you will also be making friends. You'll be growing as a person. There's nothing that says you can't have a day job while you do this. I did everything at night and on the weekends. I never had time. I was either at the office or I was at the theater and that was on the weekends too. I was in classes, I was teaching classes, I was taking classes, I was writing with friends, we were creating shows, we were practicing. I never had a minute. I didn't take any vacations. I didn't do anything for about 7 years. It was full court press the whole time. But I still had a day job. So that if I
Mhm.
ever did get to that road where, the audiences were like, you suck. I was not getting any jobs. I wasn't getting any work. Nobody thought I was good at it. I could say, okay, fine. And then I'll go back to my day job and try to advance there.
Yeah.
But you're always going to have a day job. You're always going to have something to pay the bills, pay the rent, pay your food, pay your insurance. You're going to have that. And then you hope that what you do in your free time, um, your dream chasing, your whatever it is, racing cars, being a comedian, acting, whatever it is, you do that in your free time, you get good at it and it gets good enough that it actually takes over paying and you no longer have to do the other. And then you get to be that for the rest of your life. And that's the
Yeah.
key. That's so you can do both. It's going to be hard and there's no shortcuts. And I know that might bum some people out because they all want to hear the secret. What's the secret? Secret's hard work. That's the
Yeah.
secret.
Nice. Yeah. Well, there's some amazing stories during that 7 years that you spoke about, the friends that you made, Upright Citizens Brigade, and that core group, right? But I want to talk for a couple minutes. So you got your day job, you're developing your craft, and then all of a sudden, and I just want to touch on this very briefly because I really was impacted on it in the book. All of a sudden, 9/11 happens. You're in New York, and there's a mind shift, of kind of saying, this is what I did in the military. So talk about that. I mean, things are cranking, and then all of a sudden, September 11th happens.
Yeah,
Talk
I
about that
just left.
experience, and then what you did after that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I just left active duty. So I basically spent all my 20s on active duty, basically, because I joined when I was 19, and I think I left active duty about 29 or 30. I think I was 30 when I left active duty. Um, so my whole 20s were spent in the Marines. I joined a reserve unit right there in Manhattan when I left active duty because they wanted me to go teach journalism or do something down at Fort Meade, Maryland. And I was like, no, I'm going to stay here in New York and keep pursuing comedy. So I left active duty, stayed in the reserves though. And my reserve unit was in Manhattan. So on 9/11, when we were attacked, my reserve unit was activated that night because we were right there in Manhattan proper. And that there weren't, I don't know how many reserve units are actually in Manhattan proper. We might have been the only one. Um, so, you got to remember that night they closed the bridges and the tunnels. They had F-16s flying up the Hudson and down the east and just flying circles over Manhattan. And, it was a war zone. And it was very, very scary time because everybody was in a state of shock. We really didn't know the casualty count. We thought there could be 10,000 people down there dead at Ground Zero because those buildings, they have in them on an average workday anywhere between 70 and 100,000 people in those
Mm,
buildings. So we thought, on a conservative guess, maybe 10,000, are dead in there. So it was a horrific thought and it was a sucker punch. I mean, a lot of the young people watching this from the fraternity, if they're undergrads, they don't know anything about it, but it was the sucker punch of all sucker punches. I imagine folks at Pearl Harbor are the only ones who ever felt like this. Um, but it was horrific, and I was so lucky. I felt lucky because everybody in town, everybody in New York and America wanted to do something. It's when you get knocked down and you're in a state of shock and you get back up and you just start moving because you got to do something. You got to move to kind of recover from this knockdown. And people were giving blood. There was a perimeter set up around Ground Zero to keep people out. Um, and New Yorkers were bringing boxes of clothes and sandwiches and pallets of water and to help because they just had this outpouring of help. How can I help? What can I do? What can I do? What can I do? And I was lucky. I was a captain in the Marine Corps. I had a very high security clearance for my job. I knew that the America was now going to be in a fight, um, and I was pissed. I was pissed because we were attacked. I was pissed in the nature in which we were attacked. I was pissed that I was living in New York and my hometown, at the time was attacked. Um, all these innocent people were killed. I was just pissed. But I could do something about it. I could work. I could go down, and we were activated. I was activated from the September 12th to the 30th, and I worked down at Ground Zero on the rubble piles because we had 6 stories of rubble,
mhm.
and you couldn't bring in heavy machinery because we thought there could be thousands of people trapped under there. So everything had to be moved by hand in the beginning. So it was just bucket brigades, passing buckets up, passing them down, passing them up, passing them down. 12 hours on, 12 hours off, 12 hours on, 12 hours off. And that just went on and on and on until they decided it was no longer search and rescue and it was search and recovery. And then they could bring in heavy stuff. But, the buildings, even around Ground Zero, had been gutted by the falling, the debris and the buildings. And so they weren't safe. Some of those buildings were collapsing, a day or two after the attacks. So it was a very challenging and stressful time. And I can remember because you're in a state of shock, and sometimes it takes time to process things. But the emotions were so high, and the adrenaline had been going so high, and people weren't sleeping, and I remember a couple times when I just was overcome with emotion. It would just come out of me, and I can usually control my emotions pretty well. As I get older, I find it harder, but at that age, I was very in control of my emotions. But sometimes it just burst out of you, the sadness and the humanity of it all. But like I said, I felt lucky because I was able to get down there and
Mhm.
actually work and actually do something that made me feel like I was part of the solution somehow. So I felt blessed in that sense. And then, of course, I was so motivated and upset that I volunteered to go back on active duty immediately following that, and was picked up on November 10th, the Marine Corps birthday, to go down to Central Command. Again, I had a green badge, which is a high security clearance, and I knew they were going to need green badges, so I volunteered, and CENTCOM picked me up real fast. And I think I got my orders on November 10th, the Marine Corps birthday. November 17th, I was down in Tampa, Florida. I reported to Central Command, and I think by the end of the month, November 29th, I was on a plane, or 28th, something. It was right after Thanksgiving, I think, but I was on a plane to Uzbekistan and then into Afghanistan. And we hadn't even taken the southern part of the country yet. I mean, this is still 2001. So it didn't take long for me to get um, get over there and be part of what was going on.
Mm. Yeah. So, last quick question on this one, right? So you said you were in a position you could do something, right? After it was all said and done, and you got done with your second tour and you came back, did you feel that you did something? You had an expectation that I can help. When you got done with it, were you satisfied? Like, yeah, what I did, and I raised my hand, and I had an impact on the situation. Did you feel that way?
Yeah, yeah, I did. Um, I got to work in Central Command. I got to work in the Joint Operations Center. When I was in Afghanistan, both in 2001 and 2002, I felt like the missions we did were important. We were eradicating the Taliban and their support for Al Qaeda. Um, we captured a lot of
Mhm.
Taliban and Al Qaeda fighters and got them off the battlefield and out of the country. Um, and we had neutralized them as far as a fighting force in a lot of the major cities. And we had given the Afghans, at least given them a chance um, to have a better life,
Mhm.
whether they embrace it or not. They clearly didn't. Um, that's a whole nother political conversation
Yeah, I
to
was
have.
about to say we're
Uh,
going on a wormhole in this one, and that's my
but
fault.
as far as to answer your question, yes, in the time that I was over there, I felt like we made a massive difference.
Mhm.
We got rid of the Taliban when I was over there.
Gotcha. All right, I'm going to pivot, right, and liven this discussion up. Your experience there is amazing, and I would encourage people to read the book because you go into in depth, and it really impacted me personally. Like, this is pretty cool. It's a side that of you that I didn't hadn't seen before. So I got a couple rapid fire questions, right? So you can answer them just quickly. So the funniest moment that you had in uniform.
Funniest moment I had in uniform. Oh gosh. Um, it might have been it's in the book. I think I mentioned it. I was whistling in the shower, and this drill instructor, I don't know what I think I was on some sort of endorphin high from the run we had just done. And I mean that literally because we'd done this big, run, and we had to take these very quick showers where you just kind of run through the shower stalls and you run back
Mhm.
out. And he was Jamaican. He's like, who the hell's whistling, or who the hell's working on the damn railroad in my head? and nobody knew what the F he was talking about. So we were all like, what? We're looking at each other like, what does that mean even? And somebody looked at me and goes, you dummy. I was like, me? What are you talking about? He's like, you're whistling. You're whistling. I was like, I am? Shit. So I had to run out. And when he's yelling, who's doing it? You got to report to the drill sergeant when he says, who's doing something. You run up to him and go, this candidate was, candidate, la, 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 la. You sound off. And I went running at him full speed in my flip-flops on a wet concrete floor. So when I hit the brakes, my feet just shot out from under me. I'm totally naked, holding my towel in my hand, and my feet come out, and I go into him like I'm going into third base, and I take him out like a bowling pin, slide through him, slide out of the head and into a wall, and you would have thought, you would have thought I had, accidentally pushed a nuclear missile, a button for a nuclear missile because the place erupted with drill instructors coming out of the woodwork because they thought I had, done it on purpose or whatever. He knew it was an accident because he saw the whole thing unfold, but it didn't take away his anger. And if you've never been truly yelled at and by a bunch of really mean, big drill instructors while you're naked, it's not fun. Then I
All
had to
right.
keep doing, then I had to keep doing push-ups till muscle failure. And so then eventually I'm just laying in a puddle in the shower floor because I can't even push myself up anymore. Um, I'm sure that
Mm,
was fun for everybody else. Let me put it that way. I don't think it was
yeah.
fun for me,
All right. So the flip side, what's the least funny moment you've had in Hollywood?
oh gosh. I mean, look,
Or is there multiple?
there's so many. There's another one in the book. When I had to go in for the Dr. Scholl's commercial. Um,
Yeah.
I'll let people read the book on that one. But I had many moments in Hollywood where the whole thing about Hollywood is you're told daily, I want to say daily, you're no good or not you. And I don't care who you are. I don't care what your self-confidence or self-esteem level is. You hear enough people say, not you, not you. Thank you, but not you.
Mhm.
You start going, huh, is it me? Is it something I'm doing? Is it? And it's so subjective out here. It's so subjective that sometimes you may be the absolute right person for the role, but
Right.
politics says the other person gets it, and there's nothing you can do about it. Sometimes the casting director or the director just doesn't like your face. You might be a really good, talented actor who nailed the audition, but for whatever reason, that guy just doesn't like the cut of your jib. And that's how you, and then for some other reason, some guy might just be like, I think this guy's hilarious. I want him to play this character. I think he'd be great. And you get the gig. Yeah, it's very subjective. So you hear no a lot. So almost every day, I would say, is
Mm.
painful.
Yeah. All right. Last one here. Then I got just two more follow-up questions. But as far as rapid fire, who's a tougher crowd, Marines or like an 11 o'clock set at a at a comedy club?
Marines, hands down, Marines.
Yeah.
They're like dogs in the sense that they can smell fear. They'll size you up so fast. You step in front of Marines, you better have your head screwed on straight because they don't tolerate fools, and they'll size you up real fast, and they'll know if you're a fool. So
Yeah.
and sometimes in comedy, being a fool is the good thing, but in
Right.
life, not so much.
Yeah. Gotcha. Well, this is a fraternity podcast, right? There we go. You can see
Yeah.
right over there. And question I always like to ask some of the guests, right, is that your experiences are just amazing. And again, I encourage everybody to read the book, to hear all these stories that you've detailed in there. Talk about cutting room floor. My mind is racing about. I want to ask about this. I want to ask about that. But I want the audience to get the book and read those stories.
Well,
But going,
next time we're at a Jayhawks game, you and I will go to the wheel. We'll have a
yeah,
beer, and you can ask the questions then.
yeah, yeah, for sure. So we're back at 1540, Louisiana, and it's your 19-year-old self, right? All the experiences you've had, the two dynamic careers. What advice would you give young Robert A. Riggle as a 19-year-old guy? Not only just like how to get through college, right? and be the best version of yourself. But what advice would you give so that individual could be successful, or just anything? What advice would you give yourself at 19?
Probably two pieces of advice, but they go hand in hand, so you can make them one. I would say, don't be afraid. That's one. And two, don't worry so much. I've wasted so many hours that probably adds up to days and weeks of my life worrying about things um, that didn't need to be worried about, that really just didn't need all that energy. Energy could have been spent in such better places, in such better ways. Um, yeah, look, uh, the thing that's said the most in the Bible is the phrase. Someone said, you know what the most common phrase in the Bible is? And I was like, no, I don't know. You know, I love you. I didn't know what it was, but it's don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. So 365 times it's mentioned in the Bible. It's
Mm-hmm.
good. There's a lot of wisdom in that book, you know. So
Mm-hmm.
there's take that away. You know, if nothing else, take away. Don't be afraid. Don't be afraid. And
Mm-hmm.
that covers so much of your life, and it will give you such freedom. Um, and then don't worry. Don't worry. We're not leaving here with any of the stuff. When you die, you're not taking your house. There's no hearse. There's no U-Haul behind a hearse. You've all heard that, right? There's you're not taking any of it with you. This is all borrowed. This is borrowed. We're on borrowed time. The material stuff that you have, you know, don't worry about all that stuff. The things you should be worried about are your loved ones and uh, going for it and being a good person.
Mm-hmm.
That's life. You do those things right. Keep it simple. Do that. Don't be afraid. Don't worry. I think you'll have a pretty great life.
Yeah, that's great. When you just said that in the book, and I'm not going to get into details, there's a section that you talk about get off the wall, right?
Hmm.
There was a section just get off the wall, and that's what I thought of. So we'll leave that so folks can find it in the book, right? So I love it. I love it. That's great advice. So parting question, right? So obviously you proved yourself in two completely different worlds, in the Marine Corps, in comedy, in Hollywood. So maybe those are three different worlds. What is left, right? What's your next chapter? What's unfinished, for lack of a better term, right? We're both still young guys. Some people may think we're old. I'm bald, right? So
You're
here we go.
young. We're so
What's the next thing you're going to do, right? What should we look for? I'm not talking about specific movies or here's what I'm doing next week. Like, what's your objective after, what's your next step?
well, I've written the book now. I want to develop projects that I am proud of. I think that's, you know, whether it's feature film or television, I would love to do that. I love acting. I want to act as long as someone will have me. Um, and I would like to develop more material, writing, producing. I love that. So those are the dreams. But you know, my parents are getting older. I've got a family farm. You know, I may end up going back to help out there. And I'm really okay with that too. But yeah, that's it. I want to be developing material and projects that I'm proud to be part of.
Mm,
And if I can take care of my folks or my dad, I'll be that, you know, that make me happy. And I've got I've got all kinds of family that I want to take care of and help in any way I can and be there for them. Yeah, I think that's what this phase will be about.
mm, nice. You have a very calm demeanor right now, right? I mean, I've seen, anyway, like I said, we'll have to finish up the conversations at the wheel for sure.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I'll tell you what, I would strongly encourage folks to grab the book, right? Uh, Grit, Spit, and Never Quit. I was, you did a hell of a job, Rob. I mean, I knew you, at 18 and like, really, that guy wrote a book. I was really impressed, right? That you brought a lot of emotion, a lot of good stories and good messaging. So good on you, man. And I would encourage everybody that's listening to the show, to go out there and get that book. So nice
No,
job.
it is fun to watch our Pledge brothers grow and mature and to see all the things that they've accomplished. Because we were blessed, Droop, I think, in the fact that we had such a great pledge class, and we're all still very close today because of that bond we had at the fraternity and in our pledge class.
Mhm.
But 30 some years ago, when we were all back there, you know, yeah, it's nice to see that in that amount of time that we've all grown and matured a little bit, not
Yeah,
completely, but that's what makes life fun is a little immaturity. You got to have that, or otherwise it gets real boring real fast. So
yeah,
I'm real proud of our class and how everybody worked really hard and everybody still continues to communicate real well with each other.
yeah. That's great.
Yeah.
Well, Riggle, I can't thank you enough for being on the show. I know we spoke just a couple weeks ago, and your time is valuable. And just as a friend, fraternity brother, thanks for jumping on. It really means a lot, and hopefully, folks will enjoy this conversation.
Well,
So,
thanks for
yeah,
having me. I appreciate it. So it's
absolutely.
always good to see you, it's good to spend time with you, and then obviously anything we can do for Phi Gam, count me in.
You got it. All right. Well, I want to thank everybody else for joining us and listening to another episode of On the Banks. This is where you're going to meet interesting brothers, hear their stories, and like I said, learn about the shared values of our beloved fraternity. So, as I always say, mighty proud to be a Fiji, and thanks again for listening to On the Banks. Rob, we'll catch you later.
All right, brother.